Hi, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Plant propagation video today, and the question I'm answering is, should you do this to your cuttings? And by this I mean scraping down across the base to remove a little bit of the skin or the outer bark to reveal the wood underneath. Does that improve your chances of success? This is a miniature rose called Sweet Revenge, and because it's a mini and lacks basic common sense, and because it's been in a greenhouse here with some protection from cold nights, it's continued to bloom and grow new stems all the way into mid-November. So the type of cutting I'll be taking on this is semi-hardwood active season cuttings. This follows on the heels of a video that I made showing how to do hardwood cuttings, because that's where most plants are. The only reason I'm getting away with this is because I have heated space and lighted space indoors, so I may as well continue on with my propagation. But the question remains the same. If you score at the bottom of your cuttings, does it improve your chances? And the sequence would go, you'd cut this down just as any other cutting would. You would take it down below a node, that would be your first cut at the bottom. You would score it either by taking off a strip like I showed you, or by just pressing your blade into the side just to make a mark there and reveal just a little bit of the wood underneath. Sometimes I've seen cuttings that when you actually pull them off from the main stem and it strips off a little bit of skin, then you dip it in the rooting hormone and you put it into the potting soil, that you end up looking later and finding that that's exactly where it's developing all of its callus, is where it has that exposed cambium. Basically, anywhere near the node at the bottom of the cutting where there's exposed wood, there's a good chance that it could form that callus. But the question is it worth taking the extra effort to put additional surface area into that? And for me, the answer in general is no. I get good results, and I'll show you some of the results on the table here. I get good results without ever taking the extra effort of doing that scoring cutting. So I guess as a pragmatist, if I'm getting good results without doing it, I'm going to not do it. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't experiment with it and find good results, especially for difficult varieties. This may make the difference between success and failure based on the variety either of rose or other perennial or shrub. Is there any downside to it? Well, of course, there is the time and effort that it takes, and if you're doing thousands of cuttings like this, it adds substantially to what you're doing when you're handling these cuttings. The second thing I'll say is that by stripping off that extra level of outer bark, you're actually exposing more of the wood for rooting. You're also exposing more of the wood for rot. So if you're ever having a rot on your cuttings coming from the base up, if you're exposing more wood to that soil and the organisms that are in it, the potting soil, the moisture, and so on, if you're exposing more surface area, you also can increase the risk of rot, or at least that's been my experience. So you have to factor that in when you consider experimenting with this. If you've seen other growers who have talked about the variety you're trying to propagate, and they say that they've had success with this, that puts it up the list of things to experiment with. But you should always be experimenting, trying things like different levels of heat, different levels of rooting hormone, different levels of light, different stages of the cutting at the time that you take it, whether you're doing it softer or harder throughout the season. So lots of fun to play around with these things, and this is just one more factor. I'm not saying it's the holy grail, but people are always looking for the next little bit of advantage, especially if they've had some failures in the past. All right, I hope that answers your question on whether you should score your cuttings. If you have any other questions about plant propagation, drop them down below the video in the comments, and I'll see what I can do to help.